The rain lashed against the tall windows of La Serenata, each drop like a fingertip tapping to be let in. Inside, chandeliers spilled golden light over white linen tables, turning the restaurant into a glittering secret. The kind of place where New York's elite came to whisper about business too dark for daylight. Sophia Marino moved quietly between tables, balancing a tray of espresso cups with the grace of someone who'd spent her life trying not to be seen. At 24, she had learned that survival came down to one thing: stay invisible. Keep your eyes down, your smile small, your voice softer than the hum of conversation. Her grandmother used to say, "The sea teaches silence before it teaches strength." Sophia lived by that. But tonight, something in the air felt different, thicker, charged, alive with invisible electricity. The private dining room in the back had been reserved by Adrian Costa, the name that made even the restaurant's owner, Marco D'Angelo, sweat through his tailored suit. The Costa family didn't just run the city's underworld. They were the underworld. When they dined, people disappeared from the reservation list. Sophia had seen Adrian Costa only from afar, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair touched by silver and eyes that could silence a room without words. He looked like someone born knowing how to command storms. But it wasn't him that haunted her thoughts when his name was whispered through the kitchen. It was the small boy who always came with him. Leo Costa, 6 years old, big brown eyes, a silence that seemed too heavy for someone that young. Some said he was Adrian's adopted son. Others claimed the boy was the child of a dead woman whose name no one dared speak. Whatever the truth, Leo Costa was off limits, sacred, protected by the kind of loyalty that made grown men flinch when he entered a room. Sophia told herself it didn't matter. She had her own secrets, her own struggles, an ill mother at home, hospital bills stacked like towers, a missing father whose face she barely remembered. The last thing she needed was curiosity about men who could erase her with a glance. But when Marco grabbed her arm near the kitchen door, garlic and panic on his breath, Sophia's stomach dropped. "Maria called in sick," he hissed. "You're taking the private room tonight. Mr. Costa's table. Don't make me regret it." Her heart stuttered. The private room? She'd never been trusted with it. Marco's expression said refusal wasn't an option. So she nodded, forced her shaking hands steady, and lifted the dessert tray like a shield. The hallway to the private suite felt endless. Each step echoed like a countdown. She could almost hear her grandmother whisper from memory, "We bend, but we don't break. We serve, but we don't surrender." Sophia whispered it back under her breath, a promise, or maybe a prayer. The oak door loomed ahead. She knocked. A deep voice replied, "Come in." The door opened, and the air shifted. Inside, mahogany walls absorbed the light, and a single chandelier shimmered above a long table. 5 men sat there in silence, their suits worth more than Sophia's yearly salary. At the head was Adrian Costa himself, his presence filling the room like gravity. But it was the boy beside him who made Sophia's pulse quicken. Leo sat with perfect posture, his small hands folded neatly in his lap. His eyes, deep, watchful, followed every movement she made. Sophia kept her gaze lowered as she served the desserts, each gesture precise, invisible. The men spoke in Italian, their voices smooth and cold. She understood more than she should have, but she pretended not to. She was placing the last plate when a soft voice broke the silence. "Avera?" Her head snapped up. The word, Sicilian. The dialect her grandmother had taught her, one she hadn't heard since she was a child. The little boy was looking right at her, eyes wide. "Can I have some water, please?" Without thinking, Sophia replied in the same dialect. "Certo, picciridu, subito." Of course, little one. Right away. The silence that followed was absolute. Every head at the table turned toward her. The air thickened. She felt her pulse hammer in her throat. She had just made 3 deadly mistakes. She'd spoken without permission. She'd broken her invisibility. And worst of all, she'd revealed something true about herself. But the child's reaction was not fear. It was wonder. Leo's lips parted, trembling. Then he turned to his father, his small voice trembling with awe. "Dad, she sounds like Mom." The words hit the room like a gunshot muffled in silk. Sophia's knees went weak. She didn't know what he meant, but Adrian Costa's head turned sharply, his eyes locking on her with something that wasn't anger. It was pain. Raw. the kind of pain that buries itself so deep it forgets how to heal. He rose from his chair slowly, his movements deliberate, measured. The men around him went still. He stared at Sophia like she'd just stepped out of a memory he'd tried to bury. "Where did you learn that dialect?" he asked quietly, his voice low but cutting through the silence like a blade. Sophia swallowed hard. "My grandmother. From Palermo." His eyes flickered. Recognition, disbelief, and something else. "Palermo," he whispered, more to himself than to her. Then, louder. "Do you know a woman named Elena Campisi?" The name hit Sophia like lightning. Her grandmother used to whisper it when she thought no one could hear. Elena, the aunt who'd vanished 20 years ago, leaving only rumors and heartbreak behind. "She was my father's sister," Sophia said softly. "But she died before I was born." Adrian's voice broke when he answered. "Elena Campisi was my wife." The tray slipped from Sophia's trembling hands, but one of the guards caught it mid-air. Her heart was hammering so hard she thought she might faint. Leo looked between them. Confusion, hope, longing, all swirling in those wide brown eyes. "She sounds like her dad," he whispered again. "Like when Mom sang to me." Adrian's hand tightened around his son's shoulder. For a moment, the powerful man everyone feared looked human, fragile even. He turned to his boy. "Go with Nonna Lucia, figlio mio." When Leo was gone, Adrian faced Sophia again. His voice was low, controlled, but the storm behind it was unmistakable. "We need to talk. Not here. Not tonight. But soon." As he passed her on his way out, he paused just long enough to murmur something in Sicilian, words that made her shiver even though they were soft as breath. "Amori veri non mori mai." True love never dies. And in that moment, Sophia's life, quiet, small, predictable, ended. Because when a man like Adrian Costa looks at you as if he's seen a ghost, fate stops being a myth. And as Sophia stood there in that silent room, one thought tore through her mind. Have you ever met someone who made you question everything? Someone who felt like a missing piece of your past? She didn't have the answer, but maybe someone watching this would. Hey, before we continue, if you're feeling the story so far, please tap that subscribe button, drop a like, and share this with someone who loves deep stories too. And let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. Now let's return to the moment everything changed. That night, Sophia Marino couldn't sleep. The city outside her apartment window pulsed with restless energy. Sirens in the distance, neighbors arguing through paper-thin walls, the low hum of traffic that never quite faded. But inside, everything was still. Her small one-bedroom apartment felt too quiet, too heavy with questions she wasn't ready to ask out loud. She sat at the kitchen table, her uniform still on, a chipped mug of coffee going cold between her hands. Adrian Costa's voice echoed in her mind like an unanswered prayer. "Elena Campisi was my wife." That name, Elena, had always been a mystery in her family. Her grandmother, Nonna Rosa, used to speak it in whispers, eyes filled with grief. "Elena was our fire," she'd say, "too bright for this world." But no one ever told Sophia what had happened to her, only that she'd gone away and didn't come back. Now suddenly, that ghost had a face, and a husband, a mafia boss. Sophia pressed her hands to her temples, trying to make sense of it. If what Adrian said was true, that meant Leo, that quiet little boy with the haunted eyes, was her blood, her family. The thought both warmed and terrified her. She rose from the table, moving toward the window. Rain streaked the glass, blurring the city lights into a wash of gold and gray. Somewhere out there, the man who had looked at her like she'd spoken from beyond the grave was probably awake too, thinking about her maybe, or maybe just remembering his dead wife. And somehow, Sophia knew. Whatever thread had connected their worlds tonight, it wouldn't unravel easily. Her life before that night had been brutally simple. Every morning she woke before dawn to make her mother's breakfast. Oatmeal, tea, and the pills that kept the pain at bay. Lucia Marino had been sick for years. Her once beautiful voice reduced to a hoarse whisper by cancer that refused to let go. Sophia had taken over everything when her father disappeared 12 years ago. Bills, rent, medicine, survival. She'd quit college, taken 2 jobs, and learned to stretch every paycheck until it screamed. La Serenata was supposed to be temporary. 3 years later, it was her second home. Polished silverware, murmured thank yous, and exhaustion she wore like a second skin. She wasn't living, she was enduring. Her grandmother's words often echoed in her mind. The Romano women were proud. The Marino women must be strong. Sometimes Sofia wondered if strength was just another name for loneliness. That night, after leaving the restaurant, she had come home, kissed her mother's forehead, and crawled into bed. But the darkness had refused to stay still. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Leo's face. That small, startled smile when she'd spoken in Sicilian. The way his eyes had filled with light. The way his father's had filled with something far more dangerous. She could still hear the words he'd whispered as he passed her. True love never dies. Was that a warning? A confession? 3 days passed before anything happened. 3 long, silent days where Sofia jumped every time the phone rang, half expecting a voice to demand she come somewhere, half praying she'd imagined everything. But on the 4th day, an older woman appeared at La Serenata, elegant, poised, wearing pearls and a soft expression that didn't match her sharp eyes. She handed Sofia a cream-colored envelope with no return address and said, in a voice that made Sofia's pulse quicken, Mr. Costa asks that you join him tomorrow afternoon, 3 o'clock. The address is inside. Before Sofia could speak, the woman smiled faintly. You remind me of someone he loved very much. Then she was gone. Sofia stood frozen in the kitchen, the envelope trembling in her hands. Her heart told her not to go. Her curiosity whispered that she already would. That night, sitting at the edge of her bed, she stared at the card inside the envelope. An address in Brooklyn. No instructions, no threats, just a time and place. She told herself she could ignore it, but she knew she wouldn't. Because somewhere deep down, she needed to understand. Who was Elena? Why had she left Sicily? How had she ended up married to a man like Adrian Costa? And what had happened to her? And maybe... A darker question pulsed beneath those thoughts. One she wasn't ready to admit aloud. Why did Adrian look at me the way he did? She turned off the light but didn't lie down. She sat there in the dark, listening to her mother's faint breathing from the next room, and wondered how one single word, certo, picciridu, could have changed everything. Sometimes life waits years to collide with your destiny, and sometimes it takes just one accidental sentence to set it in motion. The next day dawned gray and soft, the kind of morning where the world seemed to hold its breath. Sofia left her mother's medicine on the counter with a note that said she was working a double shift. It was a lie, but a small one. She took the subway to Brooklyn, her nerves twisting tighter with every stop. When she reached the address, a quiet street lined with brownstones, she hesitated at the black door with its polished brass knocker. It didn't look like the home of a man feared across the city. It looked peaceful. Her hand trembled as she rang the bell. The door opened almost immediately, and Sofia found herself staring into a pair of familiar dark eyes. Older, softer, but carrying the same sharp intelligence. You must be Sofia, the woman said warmly. I'm Lucia Costa, Adrian's mother. Please, come in. Her heart stuttered. Lucia, the same name as her own mother. Coincidence or something else? Sofia stepped inside, and the scent of roasted coffee and lemon filled the air. The house was filled with light, photographs, children's drawings, not what she'd expected from a mafia home. Adrian's waiting upstairs, Lucia said gently. And Leo hasn't stopped asking if you'd come. The older woman smiled, but there was sadness behind it. The kind of sadness that recognized grief in others. As Sofia climbed the stairs, she felt the weight of the unknown pressing down on her shoulders. She didn't know what waited for her behind that door. Answers, maybe, or ghosts. But she knew one thing for sure. The moment she'd spoken to that little boy in Sicilian, she'd stepped across a line she could never uncross. Sometimes fate doesn't knock. It whispers, in a voice that sounds a little too much like your own. And as Sofia reached for the doorknob, she couldn't help thinking, have you ever had a choice that felt like destiny wearing a disguise? If you were her, would you walk through that door? The second floor of the Costa brownstone was quieter than she expected. No guards, no dark corridors, just a hallway lined with framed photos. Some showed a smiling boy with curls too wild to tame. Others captured a woman with amber eyes and a radiant smile, her face half turned toward the camera like she was laughing at whoever stood behind it. Sophia froze in front of that photo. The woman looked so much like her father's old pictures of his younger sister that her breath caught. Same cheekbones, same mischievous spark in the eyes. Elena. Before she could look away, a voice behind her said softly, "She always hated that picture." Sophia turned. Adrian Costa stood in the doorway of a child's room. Tall, dark, commanding. But the expression on his face wasn't cold now. It was cautious. Like a man approaching a dream he wasn't sure was real. The air between them felt charged, heavy with unspoken questions. He gestured toward the photo. "She said the camera never caught her right, but I think it's perfect. That was taken the day we found out she was pregnant with Leo." Sophia's heart thudded painfully. She didn't know what to say, so she didn't say anything. Instead, she followed him into the room. It was surprisingly warm. Sunlight spilling through gauzy curtains, toys arranged neatly on shelves, a small bed with superhero sheets. Sitting cross-legged on the floor was Leo, coloring carefully inside the lines of a blue crayon drawing. He looked up when he saw her. The transformation on his face was instant and breathtaking. His eyes lit up, and the careful stillness he'd worn the other night dissolved into pure, innocent joy. "You came!" he exclaimed, running toward her. Sophia barely had time to react before the boy wrapped his arms around her waist. The sudden contact startled her. She hadn't been hugged like that in years. She glanced at Adrian, unsure, but he only nodded, a ghost of a smile flickering at the corner of his mouth. "He's been talking about you non-stop," he said quietly. "Said you spoke like his mother used to." Sophia knelt down to Leo's level, brushing a hand through his curls. "Your mom was from Sicily?" The boy nodded eagerly. "She sang songs in your words." Sophia's throat tightened. She remembered Nonna Rosa humming those same lullabies in their cramped Bronx kitchen. Words that had crossed oceans, now echoing in this child's memory. Adrian's voice pulled her back. "I didn't call you here to scare you," he said, gesturing for her to sit on the couch by the window. "I just need to understand something." His tone was softer now, stripped of the authority that made grown men tremble. She sat. Leo climbed up beside her, settling close like he'd known her forever. Adrian remained standing, watching her in silence before finally speaking. "You said your grandmother was from Palermo. Her name?" "Rosa Campisi Marino," Sophia replied. "She raised me after my father disappeared." Adrian exhaled slowly, almost a sound of disbelief. "Then your father was Roberto Romano?" Sophia blinked. "How do you know his name?" Adrian sat opposite her, elbows on his knees, his voice low and rough. "Because I met him once, years ago, after Elena died." The air went still. "He came looking for her," Adrian continued, asking questions no one dared answer. "He said he'd heard whispers that her death wasn't an accident, that someone inside my organization wanted her gone." Sophia's breath hitched. "My father. He died trying to find her." Adrian nodded grimly. "He did. I didn't know who he really was until it was too late. His body was found in a warehouse 6 months later." Sophia pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. The truth hit like a tidal wave. Her father hadn't abandoned them. He died searching for the sister he loved. Adrian's gaze softened. "I thought your family was gone. And then you appeared, speaking her dialect, looking at me with her eyes. You have no idea what that did to me." His voice broke on the last words. Leo reached for Sophia's hand, his small fingers warm and certain. "Dad says Mom used to believe people we love never really leave us." "Maybe you're proof." Sophia smiled weakly, blinking back tears. She wanted to deny it, to tell herself this was too strange, too impossible. But deep down, something inside her stirred. The way Leo had clung to her, the way Adrian looked at her like she was a lifeline. It didn't feel like coincidence. Maybe it was blood, maybe it was destiny, or maybe it was something even deeper, unfinished love echoing through generations. Adrian spoke again, his voice steadier now. Elena died 3 years ago. They said it was an accident. Her car went off a bridge. But now, I'm not so sure. Your father must have been onto something. And if he was killed for it. He paused, locking eyes with her. Then whoever did it might still be out there. The words hung in the air like smoke. Sophia's heart pounded. You think your wife, my aunt, was murdered? I think, Adrian said. Someone wanted her silence. And if you're part of that bloodline, Sophia, you might not be safe either. A chill rippled through her. For a long moment, the only sound was Leo's quiet breathing beside her. Then he leaned against her shoulder, as if he already knew she belonged there. Sophia stared out the window, her reflection merging with the child's in the glass. 2 generations tied by an invisible thread. For years she'd believed her life was small and ordinary, built on struggle and routine. But now, a door had opened to a world filled with secrets, bloodlines, and danger. And stepping through it meant leaving everything safe behind. Would you walk through that door? She wondered silently. If it meant finding the truth, even if that truth could destroy you? She didn't have the answer. Not yet. But when she looked at Leo, this small, precious boy with her family's eyes, she knew one thing. She couldn't walk away. As Sophia stared into the storm outside, one question burned in her mind. Have you ever been faced with a truth you weren't ready to uncover, but knew you couldn't ignore? Maybe that's where real courage begins. When you chase answers that could break your heart. What would you have done if you were in her place? The next morning, the city looked different to Sophia. Or maybe she was the one who'd changed. Every sound, the rumble of the subway, the chatter of vendors, the endless honking of traffic, felt sharper, louder, more alive. As if the world had shifted and she was seeing it through someone else's eyes, her aunt's eyes. She couldn't stop thinking about what Adrian had said the night before. Elena Campisi was my wife. Your father was killed looking for her. Those words replayed over and over, like a heartbeat that wouldn't let her rest. By the time she arrived at La Serenata for her shift, she knew pretending everything was normal wasn't going to work. Her hands shook while she tied her apron, and her coworker asked if she was okay. Sophia smiled, a practiced, tired smile, and said she was fine. But she wasn't fine, not even close. When her break came, she slipped out the back door and called the number Adrian had written on the card he'd given her before she left the brownstone. He answered on the first ring. Sophia, just her name. Low, calm, steady. And somehow, hearing it in his voice made her knees weak. You said you wanted to find the truth, he said. If you meant that, meet me tonight. There's something I need to show you. By sunset, she was standing outside a building near the docks, a warehouse that looked abandoned, but wasn't. When Adrian opened the heavy door, the smell of salt and metal filled the air. Inside were rows of crates, dim lights, and a desk scattered with folders and photographs. He looked tired. Not the kind of tired that comes from lack of sleep. The kind that comes from carrying too much for too long. He motioned her over and laid out a photograph. It was her aunt, Elena, laughing, her hair whipping in the wind. And beside her was Adrian, years younger, smiling in a way Sophia hadn't seen from him before. She was fearless, he said quietly. And smart. Too smart. She found something she shouldn't have. Something about my business partners. She told me she was being followed. I didn't listen. He turned another photograph face up. It showed a car. Crumpled, twisted metal pulled from the river. They said the brakes failed, but the mechanics swore the system was perfect 2 weeks before the crash. Sophia's throat tightened. Then someone... Yes, Adrian said. Someone made sure she didn't survive. He paused, his eyes dark with regret. Your father was getting close to the truth, and now? I think whoever did this is still out there. Sophia sank into the chair across from him, her mind spinning. The room felt smaller, the air thicker, like every secret in the city had settled inside these walls. She thought of her grandmother's words. Curiosity killed more than cats in our family. Maybe this was what she'd meant. Adrian, Sophia said softly, what if finding the truth puts us in danger too? He gave a weary smile. It already has. Over the next few days, they met in quiet corners of Brooklyn cafes and old record shops, anywhere no one would think to look. Adrian shared documents, old shipping records, names of people who'd worked with Elena before she died. And Sophia, cautious, gentle Sophia, discovered she was good at this. She knew how to ask questions without being noticed, how to make people trust her. Maybe because she had lived her whole life invisible. She found a woman named Sophia Leone, her aunt's old friend from the shipping company. Sophia remembered everything. "Your aunt used to say the world was full of masks," she told her, voice trembling. She didn't trust anyone, not even herself by the end. The woman dabbed her eyes with a tissue. She said if anything happened to her, tell her son that his mother loved him more than life, and tell Adrian to trust no one, not even family. Sophia's blood ran cold. Those words, not even family. What if someone close to Adrian had betrayed her aunt? When she met him later that night to tell him what she'd learned, his reaction was quiet, too quiet. He paced the room, one hand pressed to his temple, the other clenching into a fist. "I should have listened to her," he whispered. "She tried to warn me." Sophia stood, reaching for him before she could stop herself. "Adrian!" He turned toward her suddenly, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. There was pain there, yes, but something else too. Something that made her pulse quicken. He stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "You look like her when you care about someone." For a heartbeat, they just stood there, close enough to feel each other's breath, close enough for something to break if either of them moved. Then Adrian stepped back, forcing a slow exhale. "We'll find the truth," he said, "but I won't let you get hurt. Promise me you'll be careful." Sophia wanted to say she could handle it, but looking at him, at the weight he carried, she just nodded. That night, lying awake again, Sophia stared at the ceiling and thought about the line between bravery and recklessness, how thin it really was. She'd stepped into a world she didn't understand, chasing the memory of a woman she'd never met. But for the first time in her life, she felt alive. And somewhere deep down, she couldn't tell if it was fate pulling her forward or something far more dangerous. Her mind whispered, "Have you ever kept chasing something, even when you knew it could break your heart? Sometimes you don't choose the story. It chooses you. And once it starts, there's no way to stop reading." A week passed. A week of stolen meetings, whispered phone calls, and sleepless nights spent staring at shadows that didn't seem to belong. The closer Sophia and Adrian got to the truth, the clearer it became that someone was watching them. It started small, a black car parked across from her apartment 2 nights in a row, a stranger who turned away too quickly when she caught his eyes. Then, a note slipped under her door that read, "Stop asking questions. The past is buried for a reason." Sophia had shown it to Adrian the next day, but instead of fear, she saw fury in his expression. "They think threats will make us stop," he said. "They're wrong." But she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the quiet guilt he carried. Like every secret they uncovered cut another piece from him. That afternoon, Adrian took her to the old Costa estate on the edge of Staten Island. It was beautiful, in that haunting, half-forgotten way. The gardens overgrown, the windows clouded with dust, the scent of rain-soaked roses filling the air. "This was Elena's favorite place," he said as they walked down the gravel path. "She used to bring Leo here when he was a baby. Said the air smelled like hope." He gave a faint, broken smile. "I haven't been back since she died." Inside, the house was frozen in time. Family portraits lined the walls. Adrian, Elena, baby Leo in her arms. But one frame hung empty, the glass cracked. "What was here?" Sophia asked softly. Adrian's voice dropped. "Our wedding photo. It went missing the day after the accident." Something about that sent a chill through her. He led her into a study lined with old ledgers and files. On the desk sat a locked box. Adrian pulled a small key from around his neck and opened it. Inside were documents, contracts, bank transfers, old letters. Sophia leaned closer as he handed her one. It was a photocopy of a will, Elena Costa's, dated just weeks before her death. Her eyes widened. She left everything to Leo. But if something happened to both of them, everything would go to... She trailed off. Her throat went dry. To my brother, Adrian said quietly. Vince Costa. Sophia frowned. You never mentioned a brother. Adrian sighed. We don't talk, haven't in years. He left the business. Said I'd gotten too reckless, too ruthless. But he's still got power. Connections. He rubbed a hand over his face, the anger returning. If Elena suspected foul play and Vince stood to gain everything, it fits, doesn't it? Sophia nodded slowly, her stomach twisting. You think your own brother killed her? I think he's capable of anything. The words hung heavy in the air. As Sophia scanned through more files, something caught her eye. A letter in her aunt's handwriting, marked, not to be opened unless something happens. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded it. The message was brief, almost frantic. Adrian, if you're reading this, it means I was right. I can't trust Vince. He's been moving shipments I never approved. Things that could destroy us if they come to light. If anything happens to me, promise me you'll protect Leo, and promise you'll find Rosa's granddaughter. She's the only one who can help you now. Sophia froze. Rosa's granddaughter! Adrian's gaze shot up. That's you! Her pulse thundered in her ears. She knew about me? Adrian stepped closer, gripping the edge of the desk. She was trying to reach you. She must have known something you didn't. Something only your family could trace. Sophia backed away, shaking her head. This doesn't make sense. I didn't even know she existed until a week ago. Adrian's voice softened. Maybe fate knew before you did. The words sent a shiver through her. But before she could respond, the sharp crack of glass shattered the moment. The study window exploded inward, a bullet embedding itself into the wooden wall inches from Sophia's head. Adrian lunged forward, pulling her to the ground. Stay down! More shots followed, the sound echoing through the empty halls. Sophia's heart raced as Adrian grabbed her hand, dragging her toward a side door. They sprinted through the corridor, down the stairs, out into the garden where the rain had started to fall again. He stopped behind a stone wall, chest heaving. They found us, he muttered. We need to move. Who? Sophia gasped. Vince? Adrian didn't answer, but the look in his eyes told her everything. Later, after the chaos, they hid in an abandoned boathouse by the river. The air smelled of wood and salt. Adrian's arm was bleeding, a deep graze from one of the bullets. Sophia tore a strip from her sleeve, wrapping it around the wound as best she could. He winced, but didn't pull away. Their eyes met, close, tense, alive. You shouldn't have come, he whispered. You told me not to run, she said quietly. I'm not running. For a long moment, neither spoke. The rain outside softened to a whisper. Adrian's hand brushed hers, hesitant then sure. You're braver than she was, he murmured, or maybe just as brave. Sophia felt her pulse quicken. Don't say that. Why? He asked gently. Because if I start to believe you, she swallowed hard. I'll stop thinking straight. He smiled faintly, pain and tenderness woven together. Maybe that's what I've been doing since the night you spoke Sicilian to my son. Silence. A heartbeat. And for a brief, forbidden second, she wished the world outside didn't exist. But it did. And it was closing in. As dawn broke through the cracked boathouse windows, Sophia stared at the bruised sky and whispered to herself, how many secrets can one family bury before the truth starts to dig its way out? Maybe that's the thing about truth. It always finds you, no matter how deep it's hidden. Have you ever learned something that made you question everyone you trusted? That's the moment Sophia realized. Sometimes the people who promise to protect you are the ones you should fear the most. The days that followed blurred together. A haze of exhaustion, fear, and silence. Sophia barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the shattered glass, heard the bullets, felt Adrian's hand pulling her through the rain. They were hiding now. Somewhere outside the city, in a small cottage that belonged to one of Adrian's few trusted men. Leo was there too, asleep in the next room, clutching a stuffed bear that had lost one of its eyes. Sophia watched him from the doorway, her heart aching. He looked so peaceful, so untouched by the world that had already taken too much from him. Adrian stood by the window, his silhouette carved by moonlight. His shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, the bandage on his arm still fresh. He didn't look like a mafia boss tonight. He looked like a man haunted by everything he'd ever loved and lost. You should rest, Sophia said softly. He didn't turn around. I can't. Not until I know who betrayed us. Sophia hesitated. You still think it's your brother? Adrian's jaw tightened. I know it is. He reached for the folder on the table, the one with Elena's letter and all the evidence they'd gathered, and flipped through the papers. Every lead we had ends with one name, Vince Costa. Sophia stepped closer. Then we take it to the police. He cut her off, voice sharp. No police. You don't understand how deep this goes. Something in his tone made her pause. She'd trusted him, believed him. But now, the shadows in his voice made her wonder what else he wasn't saying. Adrian, she whispered. What aren't you telling me? He looked at her then, really looked at her, the kind of look that hides a truth too heavy to speak. Your father, he said finally. When he came to New York, he wasn't just looking for Elena. Sophia's breath caught. What do you mean? He came to me first, offered information, documents that could ruin Vince's operations. He said he'd trade them for protection for his family. She stared at him, her stomach twisting. Protection? From who? From me, Adrian said quietly. The words hit her like a punch. You? He nodded slowly. Back then, I wasn't the man I am now. I was colder. I thought he was trying to use me, so I turned him away. 2 weeks later, he was dead. Sophia stumbled back, her hands trembling. You're saying, if you'd helped him, he might still be alive. The silence that followed was unbearable. Sophia felt the ground tilt beneath her. Everything she'd believed, every ounce of safety she'd found in Adrian, cracked open and bled. He took a step forward, his voice breaking. Sophia, I didn't know who he was. I swear to you, if I could go back. You can't, she snapped, tears stinging her eyes. You can't go back. You let him die. Her voice shook, but her anger burned through the pain. You talk about guilt and redemption like they mean something. But you had a choice. You let my father die, and now you want me to trust you. Adrian's face twisted in anguish. I didn't want to fall for you. Then you shouldn't have, she said, her voice a whisper now. Broken, exhausted. You shouldn't have let me believe you cared. The words hung between them like smoke. Then Sophia turned and walked out into the night. Rain was falling again. Soft at first, then harder, until it drowned everything in sound. She didn't know where she was going. She didn't care. She walked until her shoes filled with water, until her breath came in gasps, until the road blurred beneath her. When she finally stopped, she was standing at the edge of the pier, the same river where Elena's car had been found. The air smelled of salt and memory. Sophia sank to her knees, gripping the cold metal railing. Why? She whispered to the night. Why my family? There was no answer, only the sound of rain hitting water. Her reflection stared back at her, pale, shaking, eyes full of ghosts. And somewhere deep inside, a voice she hadn't heard in years, her grandmother's voice, whispered softly, the sea takes what it must, but it always gives something back. Sophia let the tears come, all the pain, the loss, the betrayal, the truth that the man she'd begun to love had once turned away the father who died trying to protect her. She cried until the rain became part of her, until grief felt like breathing. When dawn came, the world looked washed clean, but Sophia didn't feel clean. She felt hollow, empty. She sat on a bench near the pier, clutching the silver locket her mother had given her years ago. She opened it. Inside was a photo of her as a baby, and next to it, a woman she'd never met but now knew too well. Elena. They shared the same smile. I won't let it end this way, Sophia whispered. Not for you. Not for my father. Her voice was hoarse, but steady. She stood, wiped her face, and took a deep breath. The wind caught her hair, carrying away the last trace of tears. Maybe losing everything is what makes us find who we really are. She turned from the river and walked away. Not because the pain was gone, but because she'd finally chosen to stop drowning in it. And as she disappeared into the gray morning, a single thought lingered in her mind. Soft, fragile, but true. Have you ever been betrayed by the one person you thought would save you? Sometimes, it's the breaking that makes us whole again. The city was just waking when Sophia stepped off the bus. The streets glistened with rain, the sky painted in soft pink and silver. She clutched her coat around her, the wind tugging at her hair as if trying to pull her back. But she didn't turn around. She'd made a choice. She was done running. Somewhere between the tears and the silence of last night, something had shifted inside her. She wasn't just someone's daughter or niece or the quiet girl who served coffee and smiled on command. She was the last thread of two people who died searching for truth, and she wasn't going to let their story end in lies. Her first stop was Nonna Rosa's nursing home. The building smelled of lavender and soap, the same way it had since Sophia was a child. She walked down the hall, her heart pounding, and found her grandmother sitting by the window, knitting a half-finished scarf. "Sophia," Nonna Rosa said, her voice soft but knowing. "Your eyes look like your father's when he made a decision he couldn't turn back from." Sophia smiled faintly and sat beside her. "Nonna, I found out about Aunt Elena, about Dad, about everything." Her grandmother's hands stilled. The yarn slipped from her lap. "I was afraid this day would come," she whispered. "Your father never stopped looking for her. He believed someone close to her killed her. I told him to leave it alone, but he said truth was the only inheritance worth dying for." Sophia felt tears sting her eyes. "He died because of that truth. And now you'll live because of it," Nonna said gently. "He and Elena gave their lives trying to keep that boy safe. Don't let their sacrifice be for nothing." Sophia took her grandmother's hand, squeezing it tight. "I won't." Before leaving, Nonna handed her a small wooden box from the bedside table. "This was your father's. He told me to give it to you when you were ready to stop being afraid." Inside was a folded map, a hand-drawn chart of the docks, marked with red ink circles around 3 storage warehouses. "What is this?" Sophia whispered. "The place your father said held all the answers," Nonna replied. "The last place he planned to go before he disappeared." That night, Sophia returned to Brooklyn. She didn't call Adrian. She couldn't. Not yet. She needed to do this alone. The rain had stopped, but the city still glistened as she made her way to the address on the map. The warehouse was silent, except for the soft creak of the old metal door as she pushed it open. Dust danced in the moonlight. The air smelled of rust and secrets. She searched for hours, through boxes, crates, and file cabinets, until finally she found a metal drawer sealed with a broken lock. Inside were shipping manifests, company letters, and a folder stamped Costa Imports Private. She opened it, and there it was, a paper trail. Transactions between Vince Costa and offshore accounts tied to weapons smuggling and black market trade. Dates, names, payments, everything. Her aunt had been right. Vince had been using the family business to launder money and move illegal shipments under Elena's name. When she'd threatened to expose him, he'd silenced her. Sophia clutched the papers to her chest, tears of relief and fury streaming down her face. "You died for this, didn't you?" she whispered. "Dad, Aunt Elena, you died because you tried to tell the truth." She wiped her eyes, her breath shaking. "Then I'll finish what you started." Hours later, Sophia sat in the small diner across from the docks, her laptop open, her hands trembling as she uploaded every scanned document to a secure drive. She didn't know how long she had before someone came looking. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "Adrian. Sophia, please. I know you're angry, but you're not safe alone. Vince knows you exist." She stared at the message, her heart twisting. Part of her wanted to run to him, to believe in the tenderness she'd seen beneath the anger. But another part, the part that had been broken too many times, whispered, "Not yet." She typed back, "I'm doing what my father couldn't. Don't try to stop me." She hit send before she could change her mind. Then she sent the entire folder, every file, every photo, to a trusted journalist her father had once mentioned in his old notes. When the upload finished, she exhaled shakily. It was done. For the first time in years, she felt free. She stepped outside into the cool night air. The streetlights shimmered in puddles, turning the world into liquid gold. She tilted her face up to the sky and smiled through her tears. "You were right, Nonna," she whispered. "The sea takes what it must, but it gives something back." And in that quiet moment, Sophia understood something she'd never seen before. That courage wasn't loud. It didn't roar. It whispered. And it whispered inside her now. She walked to the river and stood there as dawn painted the horizon. The world felt lighter, fragile, but full of promise. And somewhere, she could almost hear her father's voice saying, "I'm proud of you, Piccerita." Sophia smiled through her tears. Sometimes strength isn't about fighting. It's about forgiving yourself for the battles you didn't know how to win. Have you ever realized the person you needed to save was you all along? That's what Sophia felt in that moment. Not victory yet, but the kind of peace that comes right before it. Morning rose hard and bright over Brooklyn. By the time the first news alerts hit every phone in the city, Sophia was already halfway across the bridge, head down, heart steady, the truth no longer a secret, but a storm. The files she'd sent had detonated overnight. Headlines screamed, "Costa family empire under investigation!" Vince Costa's name was everywhere. Money laundering, smuggling, murder. And now she knew he would come for her. She reached the old Costa estate just after noon. Police cars surrounded the property, but inside, the battle wasn't over. Adrian had called earlier, his voice strained, almost broken. "Vince knows it was you, Sophia. He's coming here. Don't..." The line had gone dead. Now she pushed through the gates, the gravel crunching beneath her shoes. The front door was ajar. Inside, glass littered the floor, and somewhere upstairs a man shouted. Sophia climbed the staircase, her pulse loud in her ears. Every step felt like a heartbeat closer to ending everything her family had suffered for. At the end of the hall, the study door stood open. Inside were two brothers, Adrian, bruised but defiant, and Vince, gun in hand, his face slick with sweat and rage. "You destroyed everything," Vince snarled. "You think you can take my life's work because of some waitress who can't mind her business?" Sophia stepped into view before Adrian could stop her. "Not a waitress," she said quietly. "Your brother's wife's niece, and the daughter of the man you killed." Vince's eyes widened, then narrowed to slits. "Ah, the little Campisi girl," he smirked. "So you're the reason the cops are on my doorstep." He raised the gun slightly. "You should have stayed invisible, sweetheart, like your father should have." Adrian moved instantly, stepping between them. "You'll have to shoot through me." "Don't tempt me," Vince growled. "You always were the soft one." Sophia's voice trembled but held firm. "You killed Elena. You framed her death as an accident. You let my father die when he found out." Vince laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "Elena was going to ruin everything. She thought love could fix monsters. Turns out monsters bite back." Adrian lunged and the gun went off, once, deafening. Sophia screamed, rushing forward, but the bullet had hit the desk, splinters flying. Adrian wrestled the weapon free, sending it clattering across the floor. Vince stumbled back, panting, a look of disbelief in his eyes. "You're finished," Adrian said coldly. "The world knows who you are. You can't bury truth anymore." Sirens wailed in the distance. Closer now. Vince's shoulders sagged, the fight draining from him. For the first time, he looked old. "You think they'll make you a hero?" he spat. "You're still one of us, Adrian. You always will be." Adrian's reply was quiet, final. "Not anymore." Police stormed the hall seconds later. By the time they led Vince away, the brothers hadn't looked at each other again. When the noise faded, Sophia and Adrian stood in the wrecked study, surrounded by the echoes of everything that had been lost. He turned toward her, blood on his lip, eyes searching hers. "You shouldn't have come here." "If I hadn't," she said softly, "you'd be dead." He gave a broken laugh. "Probably." Then his smile faded. "Sophia, I meant what I said before. I'll spend the rest of my life making up for what I let happen to your father." She stepped closer, placing a hand over his heart. "Then stop trying to atone by destroying yourself. My father wouldn't have wanted that, neither would Elena." Adrian closed his eyes, her touch grounding him. "You remind me of her," he whispered. "Good," Sophia said, "because I think that's why I was meant to find you. To finish what she started, and to remind you that love doesn't die with the people we lose." Outside, the sirens faded into the hum of the city. The storm was over. Adrian looked at her, really looked. And for the first time since she'd met him, the steel in his gaze melted into something pure. "You could walk away now," he said. "No one would blame you." Sophia shook her head. "You're wrong. Someone has to stay and make sure the truth lives longer than the lies. And Leo needs both of us." At the mention of his son, Adrian's eyes softened completely. He reached for her hand, tentative, reverent. "Then maybe we both get a second chance." For a moment they just stood there, two people bound by grief, blood, and something deeper than either of them could name. Then Sophia smiled, small but certain. "Second chances are rare, Adrian. Don't waste this one." Later, when Leo ran into the room, face bright with relief, Sophia knelt down, opening her arms. He hugged her tightly, burying his face against her shoulder. "I knew you'd come back," he murmured. "Always," she whispered. She glanced up at Adrian, and he gave a silent nod. No more secrets, no more lies. Outside the window, the clouds broke open and sunlight poured in. Soft, golden, warm. The nightmare was over. That night, Sophia stood once again by the river where everything had begun. The water glimmered under the moonlight, calm now, no longer a mirror of sorrow, but of peace. Adrian joined her, silent at first. Then he said quietly, "You saved us all, you know." Sophia smiled faintly. "No, I just told the truth." He looked at her then, eyes shining. "Sometimes that's the bravest thing anyone can do." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and together they watched the reflection of the city lights dancing across the waves. Maybe this was what redemption looked like. Not a grand ending. Not forgiveness shouted from rooftops. Just quiet understanding. And as the night settled around them, Sophia thought, have you ever reached the end of a long storm and realized it wasn't destruction, it was rebirth? That's how it felt, like breathing again after years underwater. 6 months later, spring found its way back to New York. The city bloomed again. Trees soft with green, the air thick with the hum of life returning. At La Serenata, the tables were full, laughter spilling through the open doors. Sophia wiped her hands on a clean towel, looking out over the dining room with quiet pride. The restaurant had changed a lot since that night. Marco had made her manager, saying she was the only one who could handle both the guests and the ghosts. And the ghosts, for once, were gentle. She turned at the sound of small footsteps. Leo came running in, a school backpack bouncing against his shoulders. His curls were longer now, his laughter louder. "Sophia, I got an A on my art project." She knelt, hugging him tightly. "Of course you did, little artist. Your mom would be proud." He grinned, showing the gap where his front tooth had fallen out. "Dad says we can go to Sicily this summer. He wants to show me where she was born." Sophia smiled, her heart swelling. "Then you'll see the same sea she loved." "Will you come too?" he asked. Sophia hesitated, but before she could answer, a familiar voice spoke from behind her. "That depends," Adrian said, stepping out from the doorway, "on whether she's ready for more adventures with the Costas." He looked different now, lighter, though the scars of the past still marked his eyes. But the weight that had once crushed him was gone. Since Vince's arrest, the Costa Empire had crumbled, and Adrian had spent months working with the authorities, rebuilding what could be rebuilt honestly. He'd sworn off the shadows. Sophia rose slowly, meeting his gaze. "I think I've had enough adventure for a lifetime." He smiled, stepping closer. "You said that before you met me." "Exactly my point," she teased. And for the first time he laughed. A real laugh, unguarded and bright. Later that evening, after closing, Sophia and Adrian sat outside the restaurant. The night was soft, the city alive but not overwhelming. He handed her a small box, black velvet, simple. She looked at it, startled. "Adrian, what?" "It's not what you think," he said with a half smile. "Just open it." Inside was a necklace, a silver locket, old-fashioned, engraved with a tiny wave. "It was Elena's," he said quietly. "She wore it the day we met. Leo wanted you to have it." Sophia's breath caught. She ran her fingers over the cool metal, feeling the weight of it, of history, of love that refused to die. "I can't take this," she whispered. "You already have," Adrian said gently. "You gave us back everything we lost." That makes it yours." Tears stung her eyes. She looked out at the street, where a few last customers wandered past, their laughter fading into the hum of cars. "Do you ever think about her?" she asked softly. "Every day," Adrian said. "But it doesn't hurt the same way anymore." He turned to her. "She used to say love isn't a single story. It's a legacy. What we build after the pain is what keeps them alive." Sophia nodded slowly. "Then maybe this is ours." Adrian reached for her hand, fingers warm against hers. "Ours," he said. "And Leo's. And theirs." They sat in silence for a long time, the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled. When Sophia finally walked home, she passed the river. The water shimmered under the streetlights, calm and endless. She stopped by the railing, the same spot where she'd once cried in the rain, certain she had nothing left. Now, the wind brushed her face softly, like a promise kept. She took the locket from her neck, opened it, and smiled. Inside were two pictures, one of her father holding her as a baby, the other of Elena, smiling at the camera with sunlight in her eyes. "We made it," Sophia whispered. "You can rest now." She kissed the locket gently, then looked up at the city lights reflecting in the water. Sometimes the world doesn't give you the ending you expect. Sometimes it gives you the one you've earned, and Sophia had earned peace. Weeks later, she stood on a pier in Sicily. The sea stretched wide and blue before her, the air heavy with salt and memory. Leo ran along the shore, chasing waves. Adrian watched from the steps, his smile quiet and proud. Sophia closed her eyes, the sunlight warm on her skin. For a moment, she heard laughter in the wind, familiar, soft, like Elena's voice carried across time. She smiled, whispering, "I hear you, Zia. I'll take care of them. Always." Adrian came to stand beside her. "What did she say?" Sophia looked at him, eyes shining. "That she's happy we finally came home." He slipped his arm around her shoulders, and together they watched the sun dip below the horizon, the sea catching fire with gold and orange light. The past was no longer a wound, it was a bridge. As the waves whispered against the shore, Sophia thought, maybe every heartbreak is just life breaking us open to let love in. And somewhere inside that thought, peace bloomed like dawn. Sophia turned to the sea one last time and whispered, "What about you? If you could speak to someone you've lost, what would you tell them?" The question lingered, soft and intimate, as the sound of the sea faded into the heartbeat of silence, inviting every listener to whisper their own answer. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.